By the summer of 323 BCE, he had ruled more territory than any king before him. From the mountains of Macedon to the deserts of Egypt, from the plains of Mesopotamia to the gates of India, his name was law. He had outmarched armies, outwitted rivals, and outlived every rebellion. But in the final weeks of his life, all the power in the world could not shield him from the enemy closing in, inside his own body. Alexander III of Macedon, known to history as Alexander the Great, was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the Macedonian capital. He was the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, raised in a court of ambition and bloodshed. As a boy, he was taught philosophy by Aristotle, but warcraft by his father. By the age of 16, he was already commanding troops. At 20, he became king after Philip's assassination, inheriting a powerful but fragile kingdom. From the moment he took the throne, Alexander moved with relentless speed. He crushed revolts in Greece, then led a campaign east that dismantled the Persian Empire. Over the next decade, he fought in nearly every climate, against every type of army. His soldiers followed him over mountains, across deserts, and through monsoon-swollen rivers, taking city after city. Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, all fell to him. By 326 BCE, his empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. But the years of campaigning came at a cost. His army was exhausted, his officers restless. Some mutinied, others quietly feared his growing ambition. Talk spread of invading Arabia, even Carthage. Alexander's appetite for conquest seemed endless. When he returned to Babylon in the spring of 323 BCE, it was to plan another expedition. The city, a jewel of the ancient world, became his base of operations. Here he reviewed maps, sent envoys to Arabia, ordered new ships to be built. But in the background, the first shadows of his final days were already falling. Babylon in June was hot, even for a man who had crossed deserts. Mosquitoes swarmed near the canals. The Euphrates River shimmered under the sun, but its waters carried fevers. On June 2nd, Alexander attended a banquet, drinking with friends and officers. Sometime during the night, he developed a fever. At first, it seemed nothing serious. Commanders in the ancient world often fought through illness. But this was different. Over the next 2 days, his temperature climbed. He sweated heavily, complained of pain in his back and abdomen. He continued to meet with officers, but those close to him noticed his voice was weaker, his movements slower. By June 4th, he could no longer stand without help. He was moved to the palace's inner chambers, lying on a low couch draped with linen. The heat in the room was stifling. Servants fanned him constantly. Physicians, both Greek and Babylonian, gathered around, debating the cause. Was it malaria, typhoid, or something darker, poison? Rumors began to swirl among the officers. Some whispered that his long campaigns had left his body broken. Others suspected assassination, perhaps by a rival general, perhaps by one of his own companions. The empire he had built was vast but fragile, and many stood to gain from his death. Despite the fever, Alexander refused to halt preparations for the Arabian campaign. From his couch, he gave orders to his officers. Messengers came and went at all hours. Yet his condition worsened. He could no longer eat. His speech became slurred. On June 7th, the pain intensified. His breathing grew shallow. The palace guards began to restrict entry to his chamber, allowing only the highest-ranking officers to see him. Still, word spread through the army camped outside the city. Their king was dying. Soldiers demanded to see him. They pressed against the palace gates, calling his name. By June 9th, Alexander could no longer speak. His generals gathered around his bed, waiting for orders that never came. The silence from the man who had led them across half the known world was almost unbearable. In the corridors, arguments broke out over who would succeed him. Some claimed the unborn child of his wife Roxana should inherit the throne. Others favored his half-brother Aridaeus, though he was said to be mentally unfit to rule. Inside the dim chamber, the air smelled of incense and sweat. Alexander's skin was pale, his lips dry. The once restless conqueror now lay motionless, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. And yet somehow, the final, most brutal hours of his life were still ahead. On the morning of June 10th, 323 BCE, the palace in Babylon was silent. except for the muffled sounds of sandals on polished stone. The king had not spoken for more than a day. His generals filed in one by one, looking at the man who had once led them through blizzards and deserts. His chest rose slowly, each breath seeming like it could be the last. Physicians tried to moisten his lips with water, but he turned his head weakly. His eyes, once bright and calculating, were glassy now, tracking movements without focus. The fever had burned through him. His body, lean from years in the saddle, seemed almost weightless under the linen sheets. Outside the city walls, tens of thousands of soldiers were restless. They demanded proof their king still lived. Finally, the palace gates were opened. A slow procession began. The guards, knowing the end was near, carried Alexander's couch into the pillared hall so the men could see him. Accounts say they filed past for hours, veterans of Issus, of Tyre, of Gaugamela, men who had marched for over a decade at his side. Some saluted, others knelt, a few openly wept. Alexander could no longer speak, but according to historians, he lifted his hands slightly, to acknowledge them. It was the last time his army would see him alive. When the procession ended, the couch was returned to the dim inner chamber. The lamps were lit early that day, their smoke hanging low in the heat. Servants moved quietly with bowls of cool water and bundles of herbs. Outside, the Euphrates shimmered in the dying light, and mosquitoes rose again from the canals. That night, his breathing became erratic. The generals kept vigil in shifts. Roxana, now visibly pregnant, remained at his side, her hands pressed to his. Others stood in the shadows, already calculating the shape of the empire without him. By dawn on June 11th, he was barely conscious. The priests of Marduk had been summoned, their chants echoing through the hallways. Some sources say he tried to whisper something to his officers, perhaps the name of his successor, perhaps a final command. The ancient accounts disagree. One claims he said, "To the strongest," leaving the future of his empire to be fought over by whoever could seize it. Another says he gave no answer at all, only a faint exhalation before closing his eyes. As the sun climbed higher over Babylon, the heat inside the palace thickened. Around midday, his breathing slowed further, then stopped altogether. The room remained still for several long moments, as if no one dared to speak. Then, slowly, the reality took hold. The greatest conqueror of the age was dead. He was 32 years old. What followed was chaos. His body lay in the palace for 2 days, and yet, according to some accounts, showed no signs of decay. A detail that fueled rumors of divine heritage. Meanwhile, his generals argued violently over the succession. There was no single heir who could unite the sprawling empire. Armies began to align behind different leaders, and the unity Alexander had built collapsed almost instantly. The planned expedition to Arabia was abandoned. Instead of marching under one banner, the soldiers who had conquered half the known world now prepared to fight each other. The wars of the Diadochi, the wars of Alexander's successors, would rage for decades, tearing his empire into pieces. Even the handling of his body became a matter of power. It was placed in a golden sarcophagus and set within a massive funeral cart, meant to carry him back to Macedon. But it never reached his homeland. One of his generals, Ptolemy, intercepted it and brought it to Egypt, where it was placed in a lavish tomb in Alexandria. Over the centuries, the tomb's location was lost, and to this day, no one knows where his remains lie. As with all sudden and mysterious deaths, questions lingered. Did a fever from Babylon's swamps truly kill him? Was it typhoid, as some modern scholars believe? Or had he been poisoned, his drink tainted during a banquet? The theories multiplied, but none could be proven. What is certain is that the man who had once stood on the walls of Tyre as the city burned, who had marched into the heart of Persia and stood crowned in the palaces of its kings, who had crossed rivers in flood and mountains in snow to stand at the edge of the known world, ended his life helpless in a palace bed, unable to speak, unable to fight. And so, in the final hours of June 323 BCE, in the city of Babylon, the most relentless commander of the ancient world met the one enemy he could not defeat. These were the brutal last hours of Alexander the Great.